What's going on, everyone? Welcome to a Wednesday edition of Back Your Play with Q. I'm your host, as always, Rich Quinones, hashtag BYP on the YouTube channel, Rich Q on Q, Ally Mielnicki, who does a great job. I'm telling you right now, follow this young lady, Nothing But Locks podcast at NBL Podcast, part of Zensports. A Giant fan on the West Coast. I'm jealous. You got the warm weather. We got the cold, but we have playoff football, and we haven't been able to say that for a long time. Ally, appreciate a couple moments. How you been?
Been great. Obviously, you nailed it right on the head. It's been a long time as a Giants fan to be playing meaningful games in January. Obviously, the last one was the infamous boat incident with Odell and Victor Cruz, and that game did not end well for us. So hoping this week in Minnesota will be quite different.
Yeah, and you guys do a fantastic job. And as I mentioned, everyone check them out again at NBL Podcast. Download Spotify, Apple, Google Pod, YouTube. It's all sports betting centric, from the lines to the movement to player props to odds to spreads. And that's really important, especially if you're a beginning gambler, whether you're novice or not. So, all right, we'll save Big Blue for last. So let's run through the gamut of some of these games. And obviously, we already seen some line movement because we know some of these quarterbacks might be out. We'll start off with the Chargers and the Jags game, which actually, it's ironic, right? Because that was kind of a pick 'em. Now, all of a sudden, we've seen it at 2.5. Now, all of a sudden, it's at 2. My X factor in this, and you tell me where you're at with this one. I look the head coaching and I look at the experience. And as much as I love what the Chargers are doing, they're one of my Super Bowl picks, by the way, against Minnesota. Right. We'll talk a little more about that. You just got to love what Lawrence is doing. He's been on a roll. Jacksonville's on a roll. But I give the edge to Doug in this situation. He's been there before. So what's your thoughts on this one?
Obviously, Doug is a Super Bowl winning quarterback. We all know Nick Foles and that Super Bowl against the Patriots, Philly special. But my big thing, the X factor for me, is Austin Eckler of the LA Chargers, because we've seen the Jaguars struggle against the run. You look at what Derrick Henry did, even though it was a loss last week, but prior to that loss, his last 3 games against the Chargers, he was rushing well over 100 yards. I think if they could pound the ball hard with Austin Eckler, who's a multifaceted player that keeps the ball out of Trevor Lawrence's hands, that keeps the ball out of Travis Etienne's hands, and all those weapons on offense, it runs down the defense. So I think that the Chargers have to actually rely more on Austin Eckler than on Justin Herbert doing everything with his arm. We don't know if Mike Williams is going to play, even though I suspect that DeAndre Carter and Joshua Palmer are more than capable of filling in. But my X factor for this game is Austin Eckler. If he could run the ball, if the Chargers can control time of possession, then they will have the win.
And remember, too, Jacksonville right now, 5 straight wins. Obviously, the Chargers 4 or 5. You mentioned a little banged up. When they met earlier in the season, Jacksonville returned a fumble for a touchdown. They routed them 38-10. They jumped out to that lead. They were able to run the ball for about $150. Now, part of that was having James Robinson. He's no longer with them. He's with the Jets. I'm looking at the total 47, juiced to the over a little bit, 47.5. I think it might close right around 48, perhaps. Do you like playing the over on this one? I mean, respectively, Chargers are averaging about 24, Jacksonville about 23 points a game.
Surprisingly, I like the under on this one. It's a short week for the Chargers. They played Sunday. It's still a long week. It's still a regular rested week for the Jaguars, but I'm really leaning under on this. And I'll tell you why. A lot of these players on both these teams, this is their first time tasting postseason action. They're grown men, they're athletes, but they're still jitters. I think they come out a little shaky. If you want the best bet, I think is the first half under. I think that by the second half, they'll have their nerves calm. They'll come out. You'll see some scoring. Overall in the game, I like the under, but I think if you're going to lean one way or the other, take the first half under.
By the way, when we put it down in the green marker on BYP Back Your Play, that means it's in. You can't change it. How about some player props? You mentioned Eckler. I mean, do you see anything there yet that you might like?
I like the over in his rushing total. Also his receptions. I think that they're going to use a lot of screen passes a lot. I don't see them, especially if Mike Williams is out. I don't think the deep ball is going to be as big of a threat. You still have Keenan Allen. You have the other 2 receivers, but I think that you're going to see a heavy dose of Austin Eckler. So he's my big player prop. I think if you look at Jacksonville's side, I would actually go under Trevor Lawrence's passing yards. I think that in this game, listen, we saw him struggle in the biggest game of his career last week against the Titans. The Titans only lost that game because the Jaguars defense won that game for them. Lawrence did not look good at all. He overthrew a lot of his guys. I don't know how he's going to react to the postseason. If you remember in that national championship game, Clemson against Joe Burrow and LSU, he really faltered in that. I don't know what we're going to see Trevor Lawrence in his first postseason game, so I'm going to lead the under on his passing yards.
That's a good point. I mean, I'm leaning towards Jacksonville at home, and I feel foolish again because I have the Chargers as representing the AFC. I mean, name of the show is back your play. I got to back it. I think I don't like to hedge either. I want to see where this line's at, closing value late on Saturday. But I just, the Chargers are so inconsistent. They're such an enigma.
Right.
And even if they win this game, that coach is still on the hot seat. That's what's crazy about it, right? But
I thought he should have been fired last week after he played all his starters well into the third quarter.
And that would have been something too, knowing that they're going to the playoffs as well, right? So,
right.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I like the matchup, but I'm also curious to see what kind of rabbit out of the hat Doug's going to pull with some of the play calling. And then obviously the other Saturday game, which is the earlier game, that's the nightcap, Seattle against 49ers, which kind of goes to the theme, young quarterback, first time in there. You got Purdy, you got this team. The 49ers right now are absolutely on a roll. Now, I don't know if we start to say, look at this win streak, it scares you a little bit, the recency bias, Seattle with a little backdoor. They got help, obviously, from the Lions on Sunday night. They had to struggle to close it out, but you're also looking at a veteran head coach in Pete Carroll,
right.
A quarterback who you pressure and get to a little bit in Geno Smith's going to make the mistake. And then the 49ers, who have a hell of a head coach, but they also have a very young quarterback. And I don't know if that's going to benefit them just going in with house money, kind of laissez-faire, not a care in the world.
Listen, the 49ers have just been covering machines since Brock Purdy took over. So why go away from them now? I know this is the third time they're facing Seattle this year, second time with Brock Purdy, who just totally blew them out on that Thursday night game a few weeks ago. I'm going to ride the team until they don't cover for me. So I'm all over San Francisco. I know it's a high number. I know it's a division rivalry game. But I just, when it comes to this game, I look at the defense of the 49ers. I think that they crushed Geno Smith. Smith hasn't had a very good stretch since that Germany game. So it's a high number, but I'm going to take the Niners again.
I thought Seattle kind of peaked when they beat the Giants, right? They struggled a little bit. They had that 6-3 start. And remember, too, when you go back to those two games, think about this. In that first matchup where the 49ers won 27-7, who was the quarterback for the 49ers? It was handsome Jimmy G, right? They didn't have Christian McCaffrey. Now you turn around, they ran for $170 in the second meeting and then won 21-13. This one number is ridiculous. San Fran 12-2 ATS against poor passing defenses, allowing completion percentage of 60% or more. That's a hell of a stat, man. Now, again, 9.5.
It's a lot. It's a lot, but I'm gonna ride with them. There's no reason that San Francisco has shown me anything other than you got to go with them. I think the only game they didn't cover was against the Raiders a few weeks ago since Purdy has taken over. But I know he's a rookie quarterback. Rookie quarterbacks have a history of not performing well their first postseason start. But I think the team surrounding him, McCaffrey, Debo, George Kittle, Kyle Shanahan as the head coach who has been to the Super Bowl before. I am going all on the 49ers until they prove me otherwise.
I think two props that I would probably play is Kittle over receiving yards.
Yeah, him and Brock Purdy have ridiculous chemistry. So definitely.
Yeah. What about McCaffrey?
I don't know about McCaffrey. I think that this is going to be a game where you're going to see similar to when the Niners played the Cowboys in the wild card round last year. They're just going to throw everyone at them. They're going to throw Elijah Mitchell. They're going to throw Debo at you. This isn't a game that I see Christian McCaffrey dominating per se. So his props, I would just be a little more leery with, but I would agree with you. I've seen nothing but great chemistry, great rapport with George Kittle and with Brock Purdy. I would take his over on his touchdowns. He has plenty of touchdowns with him, and I would take the over on his receiving.
Lastly, on last point on that game, any concern, the old adage, it's hard to beat a team 3 times in one season.
There's always that concern. You saw last year they lost to the Rams when it came into the NFC Championship game, but this is a different team. The Seahawks are nowhere near the level that the Rams were playing at last year. I don't think that Kenneth Walker is going to necessarily have a good game against the front 7 of the 49ers. I think if you make Geno throw, eventually he's going to make a mistake. So I don't have any concern with the Niners both covering and winning outright.
She says it with conviction. That's what we like on the show. All right. Miami and Buffalo. Again, we're seeing that line. I mean, my goodness, is just now sitting right around 13, 12 and a half, 13. No Tua, which, to be honest, I think it's just, it sounds foolish to say, but even if that kid was healthy, I still would have been a little weary to send him out there. Teddy Two Gloves, he's dealing with the pinky issue, so it might be Skylar Thompson. By all accounts, it will be. I know they're trying to get Bridgewater out there. You know, line be damned in this one. Buffalo's a machine. This has the makings, just me now, Ally. This has the makings of a 35-13 type of game.
Absolutely. I said this, for Miami to go into Buffalo, the first postseason game since the DeMar Hamlin tragedy. Well, not tragedy, because he's alive, he's safe, we're happy, he just got released from the hospital. But since that traumatic experience, I don't think you can measure the amount of emotion that's going to be in that game. And I think it's going to be so much for Miami to overcome with a third string rookie quarterback. I don't see how Miami gets a touchdown with Skylar Thompson at the quarterback level, unless you want to do a wildcat offense using Tyreek Hill or Jalen Waddle. I think that Miami's going to be so overmatched in this game. I think it's going to be loud. It's going to be raucous. I think that Bills Mafia is going to be at full throttle. I don't know if the Bills punt in this game. I think the offense is just going to tear apart the Miami defense. So I think that this is not only a blowout, but I think that the Bills cover the over on their own.
I was actually just going to ask you that, because you're saying to yourself, all right, if Miami's not going to muster or generate any type of offense, they're going to be punting all friggin' day. Buffalo's going to get field position. They're going to light it up. Bills Mafia, everyone's in it. So then by that rationale, what are we looking at? Almost like a 50 spot here?
I think at least high 40s. You looked at what the Bills did to New England last year in the wild card game. The game was over by halftime. It was a blowout. Wow. So I absolutely think I'm an underdog bettor, and I'm already telling you that I'm taking 3 favorites with the Chargers, with the Niners, and with the Bills. I have more underdogs coming later, but yes, I think that there's no way that the Miami Dolphins come even close. It would be the shock of my year if the Dolphins cover even. I think that this is an easy one for the Bills.
All right. Then, as I mentioned, we'll save the Giants last. Cincinnati and Baltimore, 2 teams that don't like each other. Obviously, there's a familiarity. I mean, listen, Cincinnati, that's another team that I kind of think is a runaway train right now, right? I mean, they're just ripping through everyone. We know their record at home, 6-1. We know they're 4-0-1 ATS past 5 playoff games. I don't know how much stock we put into it this year, so to speak. But ultimately, who's going to be under center for the Baltimore Ravens, right?
Yeah,
I mean, it might be Anthony Downtown Brown right now. No Lamar Jackson. Huntley's still a little iffy.
I don't think it matters who's the quarterback, even if Lamar Jackson plays, which I don't think he will. I think that we might have even seen Lamar Jackson in his last game as a Raven. We could probably get to more of that later. But I think that Joe Burrow, the Bengals were my preseason pick from the AFC to go to the Super Bowl, and I'm going to ride hard with them. There is no one right now in this league that I see play with more ice in their veins, especially in big games, than Joe Burrow. He has owned the Kansas City Chiefs the last 2 years, beat them in the AFC Championship, beat them earlier this year. I think that he doesn't care about playing against the Ravens for the second time in the week. I think that the Bengals are going to approach that game and play as if they're losing by 7 instead of being up by maybe 17. I know that it got a little close last week, but the last game of the regular season is totally different from the first game of the playoffs. So again, another favorite, but I don't, whether the spread's 6.5, 7, 7.5, I'm comfortable riding with Cincinnati. But the Ravens just can't score with either Brown or Huntley. So I don't see them scoring now.
Right. And even if Jackson was going to be available in play, you just don't know about the rust factor. And I like Cincinnati's front 4. I like them causing havoc defensively. Great point on Burrow. I mean, he is just ice water in his veins. And think about this. The Rams basically sold out last year. They sold their soul, and they went out with a whimper. Cincinnati gets to the Super Bowl. They lose it, had an opportunity to win it late, obviously couldn't convert late in that game. And now all of a sudden they're back in the playoffs trying to get back to the Super Bowl. That to me tells me how good of a team they are, and just kind of like laser focused. So I kind of get the sense Cincinnati's in there. We're pissed off at everyone. No one's giving us the respect, and they're just going to run Baltimore out of the building.
I said that last year, and I rode with them all the way to the Super Bowl. I said they're the most disrespected team in the league, and they like that. They play that. They feed off of it. They have a much better offensive line. They really upgraded it in the offseason for Joe Burrow. I think he's going to have better protection. I think the Ravens are just limping at this point. They're just happy to be in it. They had a lot of front-loaded wins in the early season when Lamar was there, but I don't see them covering this game.
We'll get to Lamar in a second. Let's go to Dallas and Tampa Bay. We'll go around the league with you. Look, I don't know. There's always just two schools of thought, right? Dallas wins the Super Bowl in July. They spit the bit late in the season. Dak struggling. Here you go, all the pressure. Rodgers didn't get in. It's Brady's swan song, 7-0 against the Cowboys. Dallas is laying 2.5, 3 on the road against a Tampa team where I just don't know if all of a sudden everyone's going to say, yes, the offense is clicking because of 1 or 2 really good games with Brady and Mike Evans. I think you got to dive a little deeper in that, but I just can't buy into Dallas until they prove me otherwise.
Rich, Dak Prescott leads the league in interceptions, and he missed 4 games. That's all you need to know about this team. I think Dallas is overrated, and I just don't say that as a Giants fan. I think that there's a question whether this is Mike McCarthy's last game, even coaching Dallas. But let's go to Tampa's side. This is my big upset of the week. I think I love Tampa in this situation. I'm putting all my units on Tampa to not only cover the spread, but win outright. And the best value you're going to get right now, 32-1, Tampa Bay going to the Super Bowl. Listen, Brady can do it. Brady's different when it comes to the postseason. They're healthier. They have a healthy offensive line. I'm all over Tampa Bay this weekend.
So you got points, you got money line, you got the future 32-1. That's a tough road ahead of them there on that NFC, right? Let's not discount the Philadelphia Eagles. Let's not discount San Francisco. Is this a more sentiment with you with Tom Brady in the Bucs?
Listen, I'm not a Tom Brady fan at all, but the guy knows how to win. What if they beat the Cowboys this week and they play the Niners? Do you think that they have the favor against Brock Purdy next week? I think that they could probably beat them again. The Eagles are still limping into the playoffs. No Lane Johnson. Jalen Hurts didn't look particularly well against the Giants secondary, the second unit this past week. I just would not rule Tom Brady out. If you want the best value, 32-1 right now getting to the Super Bowl. I'm not saying they will, but if you want the value wise, that's a pretty nice ticket.
Yeah, I like it. I like it. Absolutely. All right. And the funny thing too with that Giants game, and I think the Giant fans got too giddy and Eagles fans panicked a little. They weren't going to run Jalen Hurts with all these RPOs. They just weren't going to expose him like that.
Right.
All right. Giants and Minnesota. I'll let you take this one, right? Giants are getting 3. This is the revenge factor. Here we go. Balls of Dayball, balls of stone, so to speak. Yep. Danny, I don't call him Danny Dimes. I call him Danny Nichols. He's Danny Boy to me. And then you've got Saquon and Captain Kirk. Now, full disclosure, before the season started, because I do my pod with Brandon Jacobs, 2017, I picked Minnesota.
Good pick.
The Chargers in the Super Bowl. Now, am I a fraud if I have to stick with that pick?
No, you're not a fraud. I mean, I had the Packers going to the Super Bowl for the NFC, so I could throw that pick out the door. So
all right, we're good then. We're good. I just wanted to get it on the record because I'm getting crushed on social media. But give me your thoughts on this one.
Hey, bias aside, the Giants win this game outright. They should have won a few weeks ago if it wasn't for a 61-yard field goal. They outdid the Vikings in everything. I'm all over the Giants. I don't have to get in depth, but Saquon's going to have the best game, I think, of his season this week. Danny Dimes, I'll call him Danny Dimes. He's really turning into a franchise quarterback. I think that he turned a lot of heads in the past few weeks. He had when they were at the Colts, the fans were all behind him yelling Danny Dimes MVP. I think that they have his backing. I think he's playing at the best confidence he's ever played at. I think that Kirk Cousins shrinks in big games. We've seen primetime after primetime game. The Vikings just can't win with Kirk Cousins. I think the Giants are actually a better team. If you look at the Vikings, Rich, the Vikings are the most overrated team in the NFL. How many one-run games or one-score games have they won? And they have a negative differential when it comes to point scoring. It's ridiculous to me. What do you think?
But is that also? And listen, everything you're saying, I've talked about it as well. But wouldn't you also say from the outside, that's the mark of a good team to win close games?
You could say that, but then if you also look at the factors, they beat Miami after Teddy Bridgewater went out and they had to put in Skylar Thompson. They beat the Lions after Amon-Ra got injured and DeAndre Swift got injured. If you look at all their wins, there was always some kind of factor that just went into play that went in their favor. And when they've lost, Rich, this year, they've lost big time. They've gotten blown out by Philadelphia. They got blown out by Green Bay. They got blown out by Dallas. Those are bad losses. So when they lose pretty hard.
My only concern and again, I don't really subscribe to everyone's on the, listen, in that locker room, that head coach is going to have them focus. We know that it's feast or famine with that defense, right? And I believe they're going to be able to get to Captain Kirk. You get that bad turnover when you need it. The one thing concerns me a little bit still, that secondary, if they can't get to him, that's going to be exposed. No one's talking about Adam Thielen. It's like he's the forgotten man before Jefferson. They have weapons. Wink loves to blitz, blitz heavy on third down, get him down in distance. That scares me a little bit. And you're probably going to be like, oh, come on, Rich, what are you talking about here? You know what else bothers me? I get worried with special teams, especially the punter. For some reason, I just get a little worried. Even if you have James back there returning punts or Brightwell with kickoff returns, I get a little antsy when it comes to that. But to your point, I think the X factor in this one is going to be Daniel Jones's legs. We saw it against Carolina, Tennessee. We saw it against Chicago. We saw it against Indianapolis and Washington. There's going to be some drives where his legs and his scrambling ability and his pocket awareness, I think they're going to keep drive alive. And I think that's going to be the difference. I mean, a lot of people believe this might come down to another field goal or a close game, or the Giants just aren't ready and they overachieved. Yeah, at this point, I do believe they're playing with house money, but this is the game they can go into Minnesota and win.
And I feel like they thought they should have won the first time around, and they have more motivation than the Vikings coming in. I agree with you. Kevin O'Connell was the best hire the Vikings could have made. I picked them to win the division entering the season. I thought that they would be a vastly turned around team. They are. I just like my team better going against the Vikings. I was praying that we would get the Vikings. I didn't want San Francisco. I obviously didn't want Philadelphia. Minnesota, I feel like we can beat. I'm just so confident in this team right now. Daniel Jones, like you said, his legs is going to carry that team. And the defense is healthy. I think that's a big factor. Leonard Williams is healthy. Aziz is healthy. So I really like the Giants this week.
Oh, man, your confidence is warm. When someone gets overconfident on the show, we go to this. This is the pumped up Duke. When they're when they're underconfident, we go to the deflated Duke. So now you're sitting here with a ton of. All right, give me a good player prop in that game.
I would say Daniel Jones over rushing yards.
Yeah, I can see him having 50, 60, 65 plus yards, especially if they run those RPOs. That's fantastic stuff. All right, let's go around the league for a couple minutes before I let you get out of here.
Sure.
You said something that kind of made my ears perk because I believe it as well. Lamar Jackson. I think Lamar Jackson is hedging the bet and trying to figure out a way where I don't know if I can really believe in this franchise and if they can build around me. And it wouldn't shock me if a ton of money is thrown at Lamar Jackson, depending upon whether he's tenured or tagged or not, and he's no longer the quarterback with the Ravens.
Right. Listen, if I'm Lamar Jackson, I'm looking to get out of the AFC. Look at the AFC quarterbacks in the playoffs right now compared to the NFC quarterbacks. You telling me he wouldn't be the best quarterback right now in the NFC in the NFC playoffs if his team was in there? If I'm Lamar, I'm looking at New Orleans, where I could play in the worst division in the NFC. I'm looking at possibly Carolina. Look at that defense that comes with you. I'm looking to go somewhere in the NFC. Hey, even Washington, where you have Ron Rivera, who did wonders with Cam Newton, who's a similar type of running quarterback there. If I'm Lamar, I'm out of Baltimore. And frankly, if I'm Baltimore, I don't know how much confidence I have in Lamar. It's not a diss on his character, but in the past 2 seasons, they needed him the most down the stretch during the playoffs, and he just hasn't been there. So I don't think Lamar is going to be a Raven next year.
It's fair points. And you mentioned Washington, that 95 connection. They would love that depending upon what the league decides to do with Daniel Snyder. I think Rivera's on the hot seat, and I don't know if that win against the Dallas Cowboys saved him, so to speak. But that's an excellent point on Lamar Jackson, because you've got to be available. And this guy has missed, I believe, 8 games in the last 2 seasons.
Right.
I mentioned this the other day. I banged out a short and I did a quick hit for BYP with this Aaron Rodgers, and it's amazing the trolling that I got, and I loved it. That's what I want, the eyeballs, right? We all want that. Aaron Rodgers is an all-time great. I think we can both agree to that, right? Sunday to Sunday, right? Regular season, but please explain to me how people still believe this guy is an all-time great, but he's a clutch quarterback. He is the remote opposite definition of a big game quarterback, a clutch quarterback. I think he's one of the all-time great choke artists. Now, people are saying that's a little harsh, but I look back, playoffs, championship games, favored in some of these games, losing to Tampa, losing to San Francisco, 1-4, losing to the Giants the year after the year they won the Super Bowl, after they were 15-1. And I'm tired. I'm over Aaron Rodgers. I don't, he can go off and he can talk about space and shrooms and just be a piece and all this other stuff. What's your thoughts when we think about Aaron Rodgers, his legacy per se? Is he a all-time great, but an all-time great guy that couldn't get it done in the clutch?
I think he's an all-time great, and that's what you leave it at. He has performed in the clutch. You think of some of his Hail Marys over the years, but I think, Rich, the lasting image you're going to know from Sunday night is when he threw that interception. And I think that speaks to what the guy is now. He's not as clutch as he used to be.
Yeah. And the irony, right? It comes full circle. Brett Favre's last pass in Green Bay, it was a pick in overtime against the Giants.
Right. Giants, yep.
All right. Talk a little bit about what you guys do with the podcast before I let you get out of here.
Yeah, so we're part of the Zensports podcast network. Zensports is our sports betting company I work for. So Nothing But Locks. We get on about 3 times a week. I host it with my co-worker, Robert Kowalski, who's our GM of sports betting. He runs the Baldini Sportsbook in Reno, and we just talk everything sports betting. We give you our best bets, our lines. We dissect the spreads. Robert has great insight. If you want to get into a head of an odds maker, he makes all of our odds at the Baldini's Sportsbook. He helps us, with our online sports betting. So anyone that wants to just also learn about sports betting, it's a great show. We spend a segment every week talking about different types of terms of sports betting that the normal sports bettor might not be familiar with. Like I said, we really get in depth to how lines are made, to what Vegas is thinking compared to what the public's thinking. So check us out. We're at NBL Podcast on Twitter, and you could download our Nothing But Locks podcast, like Rich said, on Spotify, Apple, Google, anywhere that has podcasts. So thank you.
You guys get into I talk a lot. I was doing it on the radio with AM 1490 right outside AC, a lot of bankroll and money management, right? Because not to chase your losses. I think some people.
Oh yeah. Never had your bet. Well, you had your bet, never chase your loss.
Yeah. I think sometimes they're uneducated when it comes to this, and for lack of a better term, like they need to be schooled a little bit, because I think especially younger guys now, right? Everyone, when COVID happened, it was all about getting in stocks, penny stocks, or then starting to gamble a lot more on online stuff or money management. Do you find, especially where you're at with your listening audience, more of a younger demographic audience, so to speak? Do you guys talk a little more about that money management, bankrolling and whatnot for some of these guys, or I should say for some of these bettors?
Yeah, we try. Yeah, definitely never chase your bets. That's rule number 1.
That should be the only rule, right? And don't bet if you don't have it. Now, you guys do all sports?
All sports, yep.
Oh, all right. How you guys do anything with boxing, combat sports?
We haven't so much boxing, but horse racing we do.
Oh, all right. You guys dive. All right, I'm gonna have to get you on with horse racing, because right down the street at Borgata, they have the nice book.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, listen, I appreciate it. I'm glad we got to get you back on. You have an open invite. And as Ally mentioned, everyone give these guys a follow. They do a fantastic job. Check out, download, listen to it. Nothing But Locks. I think if we talk next week, I'm hoping you're happy that the Giants won.
I hope so too.
Right.
Bring on San Francisco.
You got some really good insight on some of these games. As I said, it's down here. So now we got to hold you to it there, kiddo.
All right, let's go, Rich.
All right, you got it, Ally. Appreciate you jumping on back your play for a couple moments. Good luck with your bets.
Thank you.